So I've been a journalist for a while now, but I was first a sort of quote unquote field reporter and moved to data, sort of further down in the profession. And essentially, what the book does is to bring together my experiences both as a field reporter as well as a data journalist and try and tell a more complete or at least a more complex picture of India through both what the data can tell us as well as what my experiences on the field and conversations with others have shown that the data misses. So what the book tries to do is to ask 10 big questions about how things work in modern India, ranging from questions around the economy as it relates to individuals, so really sort of consumption and incomes, as well as questions around the world of work, but also things like gender, crime, politics, even things like eating habits, who we love, who we marry, questions, trying to answer those questions from the perspective of what good data tells us. And I do think this is important to remember that there is good data. And I do try to make that argument in the book as well. But also what, because of sort of the complex play of social political forces on the ground, what the data gets wrong or misses, or most dangerously, sometimes even misleads on. So that's the book, I suppose, pulling together qualitative and quantitative thinking around India. And I think what drove me to this is really this feeling that sometimes the quantitative and the qualitative do not talk to each other. We certainly see this in journalism, where field reporting and data journalism are often seen as two separate forms of work altogether. You'll see in elections, for example, completely data free reporting and then completely sort of ground perspective free data journalism. And it really seemed to me like the two could not tell a complete picture without each other. So the idea is not to sort of try to neatly answer everything. In fact, my argument is that things are not neat. Indian reality is not neat, and let's not pretend it is even in our reporting or in our writing. But the attempt is to sort of at least complicate what is received wisdom or sort of accepted narratives around India when they're not borne out by the data or not borne out by ground realities. I suspect that my process for this book has been a bit unusual because, in a way, it built on a lot of news reporting that I had already done and was very much in the process of. So it wasn't, a sort of archives that I had to go back to. It was sort of live reporting that I was doing and sort of very much in the midst of. To be honest, I hadn't even stopped to think of it as being a book. It was, I being a daily reporter, I'm sort of eye deep in all of this all of the time, and I hadn't even stopped to think about it. But at one point I was corresponding with Pratap Bhanu Mehta, to whom I had to send a bunch of my articles for something, and he looked at them and then he wrote back very kindly to say, you've written on all of these different aspects of India. I think it would tie together to make a good book. Why don't you pull it together and sort of think of a book? And when someone sort of shows that confidence, makes that vote of confidence in you, sometimes it gives you the confidence to go out and do this. So really, that's where the idea came from. Then, yeah, having been a reporter for whom usually 450 words is a sort of luxury, and as far as you get to write, the process of both pulling the information together in terms of research as also writing involved allowing myself to sort of broaden my limits in a way that I haven't for a long time in journalism. So it's not just that there's a word count or a number of words that you're looking to write. It's also reminding yourself that unlike in most daily journalism where you're answering one question at one time and stopping right there, you need to sort of broaden your mind and allow yourself to think of all of the questions around that particular topic that you want to look at, how they connect with each other, things that you've not had the opportunity to sort of bring up in the past. One of the things I've always done on reporting trips is that when I come back, I create a folder on my desktop. Say it would be called, say, wheat harvest in MP, and it would be in Madhya Pradesh, and then it would be all of the reporting I had done. Then the photos would be there. Sometimes there would be other additional research documents, all of that in one folder. And then after the writing was over for the news reporting, I'd always have a document called extras, which is just the stuff that didn't really fit into your 450 word sort of specific narrative. And when I went to all of my material to start writing the book, I realized that there were such fascinating stories in there, but they often did not fit into a very sort of neat and narrow narrative. These were complicated stories. They sometimes undermined the data, or complicated it, or sort of dented a clear thesis. And while news reporting often did not allow me to pursue these sort of flights of fancy in a way, I was able to do that in the book. So, for example, I have a whole chapter in the book that deals substantially with love and marriage. And there's a person in an intercaste marriage relationship, who I speak to through the chapter. And towards the end of the chapter, I go back to him and I talk to him about all of the data I've marshaled, which essentially shows that intercaste marriage is extremely rare in India. And so I asked him if he felt like an outlier given this. I said, is it lonely being, so unusual in the landscape of India? And he said to me, no, because, your data is on marriage, it's not on love. And his sort of argument to me was that intercaste marriage is sort of a leap that can often be much too difficult for people to make. But he felt that among his friends, he was seeing far more intercaste relationships than perhaps the data captured. Now, this story, in a way, sort of undoes the whole neat hypothesis I've built with the data through the chapter. But it would typically have gone into my extras file and never made it to my news reporting. But that's something I was able to do in the book. Pull in stories, even if they make something look much messier than the image we as journalists sometimes like to project. So that was the process of pulling in the research and doing the writing. Again, as a journalist, I sort of have that discipline of putting in words on a page quite regularly. So the writing was not hard in and of itself. The only sort of external difficulty was that I was doing this during the pandemic when I was home with my kids who were home from school. So it just posed sort of practical challenges in a way that ended up helping me, because my parents, my husband, my in-laws all sort of chipped in with childcare over the summer, and that placed an external deadline on me. While I had this childcare, I had to sort of, make sure I got all of the work done, and it helped. I'm sure my publishers appreciate that, because it helped me stick to the deadline. The process after that has been, extremely smooth and pleasant, and I've really enjoyed working with my publishers, Westland. It's just, apart from being a sort of very competent and professional setup, it's also just staffed from top to bottom with extremely nice people. So it's all been extremely pleasant and friendly. These are friends now. The nicest part of it has been that this is not just my relationship with the editorial staff, but also with the sales staff of the company, who sort of have clearly built such warm relationships with bookstores across the country that you're greeted with like you're a long lost friend when you walk into these bookstores. And that's been one of the real learnings to me after the book has come out. The independent Indian bookstore landscape that I didn't know much about earlier. I felt many were shutting down. I didn't know what was there. So that's been great to see. And I think meeting readers in situations like this, in bookstores or in university settings, is something I've really enjoyed. I've been able to do a fair amount of travel around the country for book events in the last year. And I've truly loved talking to readers after these book events. There is so much concern about the country, but there's also so much sort of energy and public spiritedness in wanting to do something. It's really admirable. This sort of, how can we understand things better? What can we do about it? From people young and old, how can we figure out what's misinformation, what's true? How can we support people who are doing, the work to get good information out there? So that's been great. I've also just enjoyed people sort of personal relationships with the book. So I love writing inscriptions when people come up to talk. Sometimes people want to give it to a son or a daughter or to their parents, or in my favorite cases to girlfriends. So they'll want a very sort of special inscription on it. So I've enjoyed that process enormously. I find it very admirable, the sort of nonfiction that is being supported by publishers across the country at the moment. I think, perhaps there have been some barriers that people have sensed in the past, the feeling that you need to be a leading historian or sort of a leading light in your field to be able to publish nonfiction is something that I think perhaps would have come in the way of younger writers or people, without a strong publishing or writing background to feel that they were not equipped to write, even though that these are often young people, young writers, young journalists with enormous field experience. So I've certainly sensed that democratization in a way of opportunity to for nonfiction publishing in the last 10 or more years. I think publishers are doing an admirable job of reaching out to younger journalists in particular, many of them female journalists. And I think things like the New India Foundation's support of young writers is something that allows people who might not in some cases be able to take time off work, or might not even feel that what they have is something that's worth a book idea. I know people who are sort of able to pursue ideas of that sort. I do think that both in journalism and publishing, while being simply able to write well and communicate well is essential, it is also a skill that can be supported, particularly because being able to write well in English is in many ways a privilege and is something that can be learned and can be supported strongly. So while there is the non-English non-fiction publishing sphere and the English publishing sphere, I think there's a substantial number of people who would like to write in English and do work in English, but don't feel that they have a sort of mastery over language that they typically associate with published writers. So perhaps that's an area where people with good material, with good reporting, with hard work on the field, but concerns about their ability to write would benefit from, say, mentors or even sort of help within publishing firms to do a better job to sort of access this landscape.